for tuning into Spiritual Beauty Ministry. Today's word is, well, first off, thank you for tuning into Wake Up Wednesdays with Desi. And today's word, as you can see, is whose hands has God placed your word in? And that's something that not many people think about. You think about, God giving you a blessing or something that's going to add to who you're becoming, that is going to be received from a place of, people who are for you and things like that. But God has a way of placing the very word that He has for you in the hands of an enemy. And where I'm going to come from today is, guys, it's going to be from the book. I got John 13 and Matthew 26. And this is when Jesus is pretty much about to come to his end times on earth. And God has already let him know, hey, this is, Jesus already knew the word that was over his life, because he already know what was supposed to take place. And in Matthew 26, I'm gonna do Matthew 26. It says that Judas is at this place to where he's trying to turn in Jesus. And Judas, if you do not know, guys, he's one of the disciples. Jesus had 12 disciples, and Judas was the one that actually turned on Jesus. So if you got to go back and get the full synopsis of that story, I would highly recommend it. It's a beautiful story. And so Judas, pretty much, he goes to these people in position, and he was like, how much would you give me if I was to give Jesus to you? And so they told him, okay, we'll give you 30 pieces of silver. And then so it said that from that point on, that Judas began to watch for an opportunity to hand him over. And so when it comes time for Jesus to be handed over, he tells the people, you'll know who Jesus is by the signal I give you. And what the signal was, he was going to give a kiss to the cheek of Jesus. And so like the people, so when this time, all this is happening, and then the people try to, stop what's finna happen. And then Jesus tells them, do you think that I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled? And so basically saying, like, okay, I know this has happened to me. I know y'all are, it's making you guys feel uncomfortable what's about to take place in my life. But this has to take place in order for the prophecy to fulfill itself. And so in John 13, it says that before Jesus turns over, it says that Jesus says that there's one of you among me that is going to betray me. And then so they didn't know, like, they were like, Jesus, it's not me, it's not me. And then so he's like, how would he's like, and you will know who is going to betray me by the bread that I placed in his hands. And so he placed the bread into Judas' hands. And this is in the NIV version of the Bible. And so, and it says that as soon as Judas took the bread, it said that Satan entered into him. But it said, but it had to happen in order for the prophecy basically to fulfill itself. So there are words. I didn't understand, like, God, why would you place the word that was supposed to take place in Jesus' life? Why would you place it in the hands of an enemy for it to be fulfilled? And so actually what came to me last night, because I encountered a situation, and that's how I know it to be true, is that there are words that God has placed over your life. And not every word is going to come from, a pastor. Not every word is going to come from people that like you. Sometimes the very words that God has for you is going to come from people who are against you. And it's actually not a bad thing, because when you look at it, when it says that Jesus had placed the bread in the hands of Judas, you have to understand spiritual meaning of bread is not actually the physical meaning of what we see when you go to the dictionary. What does bread mean? It's like a piece of food. But spiritual meaning of bread in spiritual terms is the word of God. And so why would the word that God had given to be, that was over Jesus' life, why would he place that word in Judas's hands? See, there is a word that God has placed over your life. Holy Spirit, lead me. There's a word that God has placed over your life, and he has put that word in someone's hands. And they have a duty for that word that is over your life to fulfill itself. So even though we saw it as being against Jesus, God knew that it was going to work for Jesus. See, what I've always told myself, I encountered a situation to where my husband, he had just started, he was just into like training and stuff, and getting his body fit. He had not become a personal trainer yet, but I would never forget that this person had told him, this one guy was saying that so he think he a personal trainer. This is before my husband even walked into that title, into that role or anything. Your enemy will always confirm who God has called. Your enemy will always confirm what is in you, God, the very word that God has called to come forth from you. How did that know? How did he know that my husband's gonna be a personal trainer? My husband wasn't thinking about personal training at that time. It was just, I want to eat healthy. His appetite of how he used to be just began to change, and he just started wanting to walk into a newness with his body. And so that was just confirmation that it's time for you to walk into this level of you now. And so last night when I was like I said, I had an encounter. What came to me was that what was supposed to be my word, I allowed it to be turned into my wounds, and I almost had it to make me leave the room. See, they're going to be, like I say, there are going to be words that's going to come to you, and it's going to come from unlikely places. And if you take the word the wrong way, like when a person said that to my husband, oh, he swore you're a personal trainer, and let's say he got in his feelings about that. If you take the word the wrong way, you'll take what's supposed to be a word for you, and you'll turn it into some wounds, and it'll have you to leave the room. But you have to know that God put that word in the hands of somebody for a reason. And that word was not to make you operate in your wounds, but it was to have you to walk and operate in that word so that you could become the you that God has called. So when people come and say, oh, well, you swear that you a business owner, or you think that you a minister, or you think that you are this clothing designer, or you think that you're this, you think you do that, they are only confirming what God has put in you. Now it is time for you to walk that word out. So there is a timing for the word that God has placed inside of you. So even though it came from an unlikely source, it came from a place of a person that may not have liked you, but it does not take away from the value of that word that God has placed over you. There was a word that God has put over your life, and you have to walk that word out. And God will use your enemy to pull that word out of you. So just like with Jesus, even though God put the word inside of Judas' hands, and it's like, why was, God, you do not know he was going to do this to your son? Yeah, I knew that this was going to be, but this word had to be, because it's like the enemy is like that the enemy, when the enemy gives you a word, either, that's why I said you can either take the word and walk it out, or you can put yourself in a place of wounds and have it to put you in a place to where you just like, oh me, oh woe is me. But what you have to understand is that there is a timing for everything. In God's word, so there's a season and timing for everything that God does in our life. And so even though the word was placed in the hands of what looked to be an enemy, and I asked myself, I was like, why would God place the word that was tied to Jesus' life in the hands of an enemy in order for it to become what it's supposed to be? And that was a prophecy that had to fulfill itself. So what else? So it's like everything has it's like a trickle effect. This has to happen in order for this to happen. So if this does not happen, then this cannot happen. So there are things that had to happen so that the things that need to happen can come forth. And so when I look at it, it's like there is like, okay, God, you want somebody to hold a word that is for my life. That spoke a word that was over that I didn't see at that moment, but it was a word that you had put over my life, but I did not see it at that moment. And it's like, but they were against when they said it, they were not for me, they were against me. Like I told you guys, and the person said that towards my husband, they were never for, they was not for they saw what my husband did not see. And even though it came from an unlikely source, but he was only calling forth what God said it is time to now become. And so when that happens, it was, I look at it like, how can they handle the capacity? God, you putting the word of who you say I am in the hands of somebody that can't even handle the capacity of me. But that does not mean anything. God is only using them to help birth the word that is needing to come forth from you. So it's not going to always come from, like I said, from a likely source, but you have to know the difference. And even though you have to know when God has given you a word, it does not, I've received words many times. And place, not even just words over my, not even just words that God is saying to me, but just words that he want me to give to his children. It's been in moments that's been chaotic. It's been in places that's been crazy, but I still got a word. So the word is not going to always come in a likely place, from a likely place, but you have to not allow who gave you the word to move you from the place of the room that God has said, hey, this is for you. This is yours to have. So whenever you hear that, somebody says, oh, so you think that you're a doctor? Okay. That is only the enemy confirming what God has called. Also, you think that you're a nurse? Okay. Also, you think that you are a hairstylist? Also, you think that you are. So you think that you are. These are only the words that are only confirming what God has called. So do not let these words make you leave the room. Do not let these words make you leave the room. Because even though it is coming from them, and they are already fighting with the change that they see that is taking place in you. And I was so amazed at God. Why would you give a word to a person that is against me? They can't even handle the capacity that you have put upon me. But in due season, the word that came from the very person that was against you, God is going to turn it around, and they are going to be able to handle that new capacity of that change that God has put in you. It's the season for everything. Just like it was a season, that was a time for them to release that word to you, even though it may have came in an ugly way. It may have came in a way them trying to be funny or whatever. It may try to be sarcastic or be messy, whatever it may have been. They did their part. So you either say, instead of looking at your enemy as being against you, okay, thank you. Thank you for confirming what God is about to do. Thank you for confirming what God is about to allow to take place in my life. If my husband would have allowed the words of that young person to deter him from the room that God said, this is you, then he wouldn't be where he's supposed to be right now. He wouldn't be where God has him at right now. But God had to use an enemy in the room so that my husband can walk in the room. And that's for any of us. There are going to be words that are going to be spoken to you. And it's sometimes going to seem like it is against you, but it is only God calling forth that word that he is saying. It is now time for it to birth. It is now time for it to become. It is now time for it to live in you. Just like with Jesus, even though Judas carried the word and he was full of hate, how can God put a positive word of change in a heart of hate? Because the very word that was being carried by the enemy, was going to be the very words that turned around. Now that word was going to begin to heal wounds. Because towards the end of the story, it said that Judas couldn't even though he betrayed Jesus, and he spoke against Jesus, and he did opposite of Jesus, he couldn't even take what he had done, and that the very money he had, he couldn't even go through with it. He killed himself. Because he began to realize that was the Messiah. He didn't see it at that time because he allowed his mind of hate and everything else to cloud his judgment, and he couldn't see Jesus because he was too busy being blinded with what he thought, okay, why this couldn't be Jesus. He got allow other things to feed his ears and things like that. But in due timing, like I said, I hate it happening the way it happened. But when he began to, of course, realize at the end of the story that Jesus was the Messiah. And just like the person who is carrying your word, they may not see it. They're seeing it because they do see the change, but they may be fighting with what's about to take place in your life, or fighting with accepting what is in your life. But it does not mean that your word holds less value because of whose mouth spoke it. No, it's just that the very words that the very mouth that spoke it, when that word comes to comes forth in your life, God's gonna use that same word to pull the very person who he needs you to go feed and breathe life. So you're gonna be the motivation to somebody else in some shape, form, or way. And so the word that God has them to speak to you, even though they fight with the change that is taking place within you, in due timing, God will stretch forth in them a capacity to be able to hold the word that he has spoke and delivered to you, and he has placed over you. Right now, there's not too many people are going to be open to the word, open to that change that's about to take place in your life. But just listen to, don't focus on who is rejecting you. Just focus on the word that God has spoke from them that is to you. Just focus. Sometimes you gotta take what is being said. You gotta just not and block out what is being said. Like even at the moment when I heard something, I was just like, okay, I mean, of course that was on some other type stuff. But then I was just like, I remember I told my husband, I was just like, but listen to what was said. Also, he think that he's a personal trainer. And it was just like, it was only confirmation that my husband was moving in the right place. He was moving in the journey and in the path of where God was leading his feet. He was right where he was supposed to be. So just because the person that carries the word to you, they may have ill motive, they may have hate, but they cannot devalue the word that God said is for you. That word still is going to play itself out. God has allowed it to come from the place that fought to receive you, because in due timing, they're going to see that word manifested within you. And God's going to use that same word to pull them out. God's going to use the same word to pull them out. Because it's so crazy. Now the very person that I remember that said those words to my husband is the very person now. It's like it's doing the same thing. It's like they're doing the same thing. It was just that they saw that he had that hunger more. I want to get that hunger. How does he make it be like that? How does he operate? How does he walk in it? It was never that they were against you. It was that they did not know how to hold the word that they seen that was on you, because even though God gave it to them, they didn't know how to hold the word. They didn't know that God gave them word. They just thought they were just being ugly and hateful. But God used them. As you can see, like I said in the Bible, it said in Judas 13 that it says that Jesus placed the bread in Judas' hands. The bread in spiritual terms means the word. And it says Satan entered him. So even though the word was placed in their hands, they still fought with accepting the fact that this was what it was. But it just had to take it had to take their mind being positioned to a place to where it's like your mind. It's like sometimes we want people to accept in us, but they can't accept what's in us until God first changes their mind. And that's the word. I'm actually going to do a word on it. It's about when God changes your mind. And when God changes your mind, he changes how you think. And when God changes how you think, then you begin to walk in a new you and into a transformed you. And then you'll be able to handle the capacity of that thing that you once false that you saw against you. So it was never that this person was against my husband. It was that they didn't know how to walk in what they seen that was on my husband. Instead of saying, hey, can you help me? It was like, hey, let me talk against you. If we could stop talking against each other and just see, sometimes a person can carry and possess something that you want. But instead of, looking to them to whatever they need to be to you, you talk against them, and you allow hate to fill you, and you allow jealousy and all types of things to become you. Instead of just, saying, hey, this is where I'm at. And I really like how you do this right there. Not being afraid to approach that thing that we hunger for as well. Not knowing that, hey, there was a part of me that hungered for that thing that you were releasing, but I don't know how to walk in it. Can you help me? I like that. I don't know how to. I see how you walking your change. I don't know how to do that. I see how you do this, you do that, and it's so instead of just admitting that, hey, I want to be at that place. Not saying to covet what the person has, but to want that change, to want that more, and like, how did you get there? How do I stay consistent in making that which I thought I wanted? And sometimes it just takes a person seeing the change in you, and they just like, what, I want to have that change too. But instead of saying how I want to have that change too, they allow jealousy, or they allow competition or other things to come in, and it takes away from that moment that was supposed to be a place of change to become a place of change. So that's why I wanted to let you guys know that there are going to be words that God is going to place in the hands of many different types of people, and they are not going to always be for you. But don't be so focused on them not being for you with the word that you see that they spoke that was against you. In due timing, God is going to allow them to be able to handle the capacity of that word that he has placed upon you. But in order for him to allow them to handle the capacity of that word that he has placed upon them, he has to first change their mind. Because an unchanged mind that's trying to handle a capacity of someone else's change is impossible. You're going to keep on fighting against it. But the minute God begins to change their mind, God will begin to change their appetite. And then when God begins to change their appetite, then God will begin to stretch. And when God begins to stretch, he will begin to download and increase. And when God begins to download and increase, then it's what was once a rejection now becomes more of them receiving. But it's a process. So that's all I want to let you guys know is that don't count those out who may say things to you that's, oh, so you think that you were this or you think that you were that. They are only doing their job. And the job that they were sent to do was to confirm the word that God has put in you. And now when they confirm the word that God has put in you, you just walk that word out. And don't need to fight against them, and don't need to, go into ugliness. Just know that they had to do their position. And when you walk your word out, then God is going to use the word that they gave to you to heal them in their wounds. But you got to first walk your word out. So if God has placed your word in the hands of somebody that does not like you, just focus on the word that's focused on that word that has spoke to you. And somewhere with that word that has spoke to you, it registered with something that that's in you. And you're like, that's that, it is my time to do it. It does that. And I even for myself, there are things I have got from people have said, that was against me. But when I stopped looking at it as being against me, and I started looking at like, God used them to bring forth that word that was for me, then I stopped seeing them as my enemy, because all I need to do was just take that word and walk it out. And that word was only confirming what God was about to do. Even though they may have gave the word out of an ugly place, a hateful place, it did, like I said, it did not change the value of the word that God had placed over me. And so when I grasped that word, and I did not allow that word to keep me in my wounds, in order I allowed that when I did not allow that word to remove me from the room, then I began to operate in everything that God said was mine. And so when I operated in that word and I began to walk that word out, now I'm able to go back to that very place that I once saw that was enemy, pull them out of their wounds from the word that God had placed in me. So all it is that God is feeding you, not to just feed you, but to feed those that he has called you to. So like I said, so when they say, oh, so you think that you are this, or you think that you are that, or so you think you're a nurse, or you think that you're a doctor, or you think that you are a fashion designer, or this and that, they are only confirming to you what God said, what God is saying is in you. And so that's why we cannot be so quick to write off our enemies, because Even like I said, God is going to put your words in the unlikely hands. But it does not matter what hands he puts it in. That word does not devalue itself. It still holds a value. It still is valuable over you. It's what you choose to do with it. And when you hear those words, do you take the words and you begin to put yourself in a place of wounds, and you, like I said, woe it's me, like, why that person don't say that to me? Or, why they up there, going to that whole mindset? Are you gonna say, you know what? Let me take what I just heard them say, and let me begin to have this word to work my way. So I heard you say, oh, I think that I'm this. I think I'm a nurse. Oh, so I think that I'm this. I think I'm that. What you do is now you take that word, you begin to make it work for you. And stop allowing it to have you to leave rooms that God said, this is where you're supposed to be. I'm sure there are many rooms that many of us have left because of words that people have said. Like I said, they are only confirming what is in you. There is more that you have yet to see that's in you. And if God has to use an enemy to push it forth from you, he would do just that. Like I said, even Jesus had to have Judas carry his word. Judas was an enemy that was against Jesus. But these are the words that Jesus said. Even though Judas was an enemy that was against Jesus, that was coming to betray Jesus, Jesus said prophecy must fulfill itself. Meaning that what is supposed to come has to come. So it does not matter who delivers the word still has to become a living word, so that which is to become can begin pretty much walking in that newness, walking in that change. Because your word is, like I said, your word is not just for you, but your word is for everything that is tied to you. That's generational. That can be, your word can be to be breaking generational bondage. Your word can be to break generational cycle of the mind. It's just that word that is on you could be to do many other things. You could be the first person that God said, a person also, you think you're a nurse or a doctor or this hairstylist. You could be the person that God is going to use to do something through. And he had to use you, even though you're seeing, like I said, even though you may be seeing as this person is trying to talk against me. No, that person is not talking against you. That person is only confirming what is about to come forth from you. But the only way that word can come forth from you is if you not allow who has said the word to have you to operate in your wounds. Because when you begin to operate in your wounds, then you begin to remove yourself from a room that God has said this is where you're supposed to be. Do not allow somebody to have you to leave a room where God has placed you, because you're not like what they said or how they said it to you. Oh, so you think that you better because you don't want to stay over here no more? You trying to go live, or you trying to live in this type of area? If that's what they want to say, if that's what they want to, if that's what their mind, because sometimes people can only see what they can see because of where they are. All you gotta do is just focus on on whatever they say something. Just sometimes you gotta just take some positive from what is being said. And allow God. So God, I know this is what they said, but God, what are you saying? And when you can get to that place, then their words won't bother you, because you know God only used you to push me. So actually, to my enemies, thank you. And that's what I would say to anybody. Don't allow your enemies to make you leave the room. Because it's gonna be your enemies that God is gonna use to have you to get elevated in the room. But if you leave the room too soon because they have hurt you with their words, then you are not going to be able to operate in your word. God has put a word over all of our lives. And some of us have abandoned those words because of what people have said. And you don't want them also, so you think you better because you're going to school, or you think you better because you got a house, or you think you better because you got this, you got that, or you doing this, or you think you this, you think, and it's like we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. So we fear for them to leave, and we limit who we're supposed to be because we don't want them to feel uncomfortable. But the minute you begin to limit yourself, then you will keep what is supposed to be for you because of the words that you are allowed to starve you versus feed you. These words were supposed to feed you, not starve you. Like I told you guys, when my husband, when he was told to, he was like, oh, so you think, before my husband even became a personal trainer, and I never forget the person, my husband just changed his way of eating. He just had a different mindset of how he wanted to, do his life when it came to health. And not once thinking about personal training, just, this is just something I want to do for me. And an individual was saying, oh, so you think you're a personal trainer? At that moment, it could have been like, you know what, I'm done with this. But in that moment, I was like, baby, think about it. So you think that you're a personal trainer? This is only confirmation of the thing that God is telling you to go walk into. Let's fast forward years to now. My husband's a personal trainer. See, that's why I said you have to be careful not to allow their words that you see that is against you to move you from the room that God has placed you. You could be right where you're supposed to be. And there's going to be somebody that's going to come and say something that's going to rub you the wrong way. But if you just actually listen to what was said, take what you can and say, God, how can you use this? I know they said this, but how can you use this? And that's what I wanted to let you guys know, is that there's a word that God has placed in the hands of probably your enemy. But do not allow your enemy, or who you may see against you, to have you to leave the room that God has placed you in that is for you. Thank you guys for tuning in to Wake Up Wednesday with Desi. I think I'm actually going to give another word tonight or today, but I'm not sure. But yeah, so you guys just be blessed. Like I said, when that word comes to you and it seems like it's against you, 9 times out of 10, it's only confirming what God has called you to walk into. All right. You guys be blessed.